Good evening. My name is Bob Liff, and this is the CUNY Forum, a monthly town meeting that brings prominent New Yorkers together with faculty and students of the Edward T. Rogowsky Internship Program in Government and Public Affairs. Michael Bloomberg's 12 years in office are coming to an end this year, assuming he doesn't figure out a way to do away with term limits once again. The good news in the mayor's race is that we have not had an indictment in at least 3 weeks. Councilmember Christine Quinn, seeking to become the city's first woman and the first lesbian mayor, is holding on to a shrinking lead over a field, in large part because she has had to make decisions on difficult issues, and that is bound to upset some people. Her major Democratic challengers, former Comptroller Bill Thompson, current Comptroller John Liu, Public Advocate Bill de Blasio, and former Councilman Sal Albanese, say her problems stem from the decisions she has made, not just the fact that she has had to make them. With former Congressman Anthony Weiner edging back into the race, the campaign promises a spirited debate. On the Republican side, Joe Lhota, a former MTA chairman and top Giuliani administration official, is going up against oil and supermarket magnate John Catsimatidis and George McDonald, a former Wall Streeter turned homeless advocate who changed his registration in time to become a real Republican. Of course, in this Democratic-dominated town, everybody knows we would never elect a Republican mayor, except that we have in the last 5 mayoral elections. There are lots of important issues already drawing debate, including stop and frisk, a proposal for an inspector general in the NYPD, the need for affordable housing, and Bloomberg's efforts to reform the city's school system, which are either a rousing success or a debilitating failure, depending on who you ask. For those who view politics through the lens of identity, there are lots of potential firsts, or in the case of Bill Thompson, a chance to become the second African-American mayor. Liu would be the first Asian-American mayor. Catsimatidis would be our first Greek and second billionaire mayor. Joe Lhota would be our first Czech mayor. And Bill de Blasio would be our tallest mayor, I think. It could be that the one major demographic cohort not represented among major candidates, meaning Latinos, though former Bronx Borough President Adolfo Carrion is continuing his effort to become the city's first Latino mayor on the Independence Party line, could become the focus of lots of love from hungry politicians. So we turn to 4 New Yorkers who watch this very closely as we begin to turn the page on the Bloomberg era. Robert George is an editorial page writer for the New York Post. Marlene Peralta is a senior political reporter at El Diario La Prensa. Lisette Nieves is the Bell Zeller Distinguished Professor at Brooklyn College at my alma mater, Brooklyn College. And Mark Lieberman is an economist and former reporter who is now part of the CUNY TV family. Lisette, let me start with you. This is, of course, we don't even know when the primary is going to be because the legislature hasn't said it at this late date. But you have a very large field. Yes. Seeking to replace a man who's really dominated the civic landscape for 12 years.
Yeah, there's no question. And I think some of the first things people think about is, let's pick the front runner, the person who has raised the most money. And I don't think that that's the way it's going to go. There's a part of me that Quinn's kind of leading the pack and raising money, but yet at the same time, too, she still doesn't know what to do with what people might think of as her built-in base. She's more moderate than she is left, which might be some of the built-in base.
She is now.
She is now. The question becomes, is she going to be a flip-flop kind of person? I don't think she's going to go as left as people would want her to be. And so she's raising money. She's raising money from a more conservative area, I would say, even in New York, a wealthier area in New York, not as liberal. I don't know. Everyone thinks she's the front runner, and I just don't quite see it that way.
Robert?
Well, the polls do suggest that she is the front runner, though she's lost a lot of that lead over the
last week.
Over the last few weeks. But I thought it is rather interesting that that Billy Thompson, who first of all surprised people 5 years ago when people thought he had no chance against Bloomberg, and he ended up losing only by maybe 4 or 5 points. He has managed to stay pretty close behind Chris Quinn in the fundraising race and ahead of both Bill de Blasio and John Liu. And for a person who's been out of office for 4 years, that's actually rather significant. And if it gets to the point where let's keep Anthony Weiner off to the side for the time being, but if it gets to the point, right now it does not look like Chris Quinn would get 40%, which would mean that there would be a runoff. And if it ends up being her versus Billy Thompson, I think I would give him a slight edge, frankly, because one of the things that I think a number of the candidates are going to start focusing on with Chris Quinn as this race goes on is her support on term limits, and the fact that she basically allowed Mayor Bloomberg to have a fourth term.
A third term.
third
Yes,
term.
fourth
Third
yet.
term.
Is there something that's opposed? No?
I certainly hope not. A third term. That is something that is. Joe Loda has already mentioned that that'll probably be an issue for him. Anthony Weiner, in some of his pre-entry interviews, he's mentioned that a bit as well. And Thompson, who obviously was the one who suffered the most by Bloomberg being able to run for a third term, I'm sure that's going to be a major issue. And
Blasio has already raised it.
Yeah.
I mean, he said the other day, you broke it, you bought it. I mean, he's blaming Quinn for all of the ills of Bloomberg 3.
And we still have yet to figure out if the Thompson vote was more of a vote for Thompson or an anti-Bloomberg vote.
Well, it really,
So that's going to
if
be
you
an
look at that
very
vote,
important
though, if
question.
you look at that vote, Bill Thompson got only about 30,000 votes more than Freddie Ferrer. The reason the vote was as close as it was is because Bloomberg got 250,000 fewer votes. Why? I would leave it to others, but I'll posit a couple of reasons. Number one, he kept saying, I'm going to win, I'm going to win, I'm going to win, and he discouraged his own supporters, and people were a little upset about the third term. The other thing was that it was rather the 2009, not to replay 2009 entirely, Barack Obama, the Democratic president of the United States, never came into New York to campaign for the Democratic nominee. He went to New Jersey 3 times to campaign for the Democratic nominee for governor, but never came into New York.
And interestingly enough, well, first of all, Thompson had basically no institutional Democratic support. I mean, most of the Democratic support went to Bloomberg, and that played a major factor.
Go ahead, Marlene.
Well, I was going to say that, you also have to think about the minority support that Bill Thompson got.
Absolutely.
I mean, and we often think that minorities are not going to go to vote, and they did vote for him. I mean, that's something that needs to be taken into account, and I think that will happen again this time. I mean, yes, a lot of people don't go out to vote, but I think they're paying attention to all these candidates.
And that's where Anthony Weiner hurts Bill Thompson probably more than anybody else. He's the only, if he enters, he's the only Jewish candidate. Bill Thompson is very popular.
Kristen Quinn is the only woman candidate.
No, but Bill Thompson is very popular.
important.
Think about who votes in
Right.
a primary.
Yeah.
Bill Thompson is very, very popular among Jews. And if Anthony Weiner is in the race, he takes some of that.
Well,
In fact, Rob, the early poll that came out just testing Weiner's name in it, it went from Quinn being number one, Quinn being number one, with Thompson a relatively strong number 2, to Weiner coming in at number 2 and Thompson dropping to third or fourth. And
But there was a big demographic difference. There was an age demographic difference in the Weiner support. We have to make it clear. Not as many younger folks are going to be in the primary, voting in the primary. They vote in the actual election. You're going to have older folks who are not as forgiving voting in the primary about what the Weiner moment, And so, I think that's an interesting question around that.
Let me raise a question about identity issues. We're talking about identity politics. I worked with Congressman Rangel. I spent a lot of time in Harlem, where Thompson is not as popular as you might expect among African-American voters. Speaker Quinn is taking a lot of incoming fire from the gay community. And there's, de Blasio in particular has lined up significant support within the gay community. Is identity too simple a filter through which to look at this election?
Absolutely. Well, if you noticed 4 years ago, John Liu actually, in a sense, became sort of the honorary brother candidate, because he had a lot of his consultants and campaign organization were African American, and he got a lot of African American support there as well. So it is going to be, and there's always been a tension to say the least, between the African American community in Brooklyn and the African American community in Harlem, and that certainly does play out in the context.
Well, it played out in the
Village-
Dinkins
of Village-
election
Yes,
in
it did.
1989.
The disappointing thing is, and we're demonstrating it here, we're not talking about one issue. We're talking about race. We're talking about sexual orientation. We're talking about fundraising. We're
Age
talking about
in
the
there.
polls.
Gender.
We're not talking one. We haven't mentioned an issue yet.
Well, let's
and,
do that.
and there are
I know
significant
you've
issues.
done a lot of work on the economic challenges that a new mayor is going to face. I mean, is the city, where we have a businessman mayor? Has he left? Is he leaving the city in
Let's
decent
break
shape?
that for a second. And we have the government is not a business. Government is not here to make a profit. A business is there to make a profit. So the fact that there's a businessman mayor doesn't, at least in my view,
It's a manager
doesn't cut
mayor.
it.
I mean, when he's
manager.
Right.
Okay, that's better. That's a better
Okay.
phrase than a businessman.
I will try to
But-
use better phrases.
Okay. The city has a $71 billion budget that the mayor just proposed a little earlier this year. And it is in balance, and we're looking at a relatively small budget gap for the next mayor. But let's look at what's left out of that budget. There's nothing for settlement for union negotiations.
I think over 100 outstanding
Contracts, exactly.
contracts.
And we could be
Do we
looking.
have any contract settled? I don't
No.
believe
No, we
any.
don't.
We
have
could be
no
looking at
announced
145, assuming if the settlements
are retroactive.
are what they had been.
Which they
we
can't
could be
be.
looking. We could be looking at $145 million in cost to the city. That not insignificant. At the same time, the city is facing other issues with respect to the budget on the Hurricane Sandy relief. There's still school money.
Well, there's
This-
the continuing metastasizing pension aspect
Right.
of it, which is why last week
And the mammoth capital budget. I mean, when I was a reporter covering City Hall, one of the numbers I always looked at was how much out of every dollar you pay goes to pay a bondholder before it can hire a cop.
Well, in
before it
fact,
can hire
that is
a
coming
teacher,
down
before it can
because
hire-
interest rates have
Well, it
come
was
down.
15 and 16 and 17 cents on every dollar before you hired anybody.
But that actually is one of the reasons why the unions have basically been trying to basically wait out Bloomberg and figuring that with a likely Democratic mayor they're going to have they'll be in a better bargaining position. But the fact is the reality of bond issues and so forth is really going to kind of constrain the next mayor in terms of some of the deals that he's going to make. I mean,
But
he's
there
not
is
gonna
a
be
way.
able-
There is a way out of it. I mean, if we do, the next mayor could negotiate with the unions and say, "Look, I will give you a 2% raise retroactive, but I don't want my pension system to blow up. So what I will give you is the equivalent in cash in a one-shot, non-pensionable payment." And there you have satisfied the union demands without exploding and already.
But I think they're
But
going to have
burgeoning-
to demand.
Yeah, but I think putting unions as this monolithic piece without talking about the policy underpinning them is a problem here, right? Because I think at the end of the day, we have to think about it too. Who is the teachers going to be supporting ultimately? I'm curious to see which candidate that they're backing up. Because right now, talking about the teachers union, they're very clear what they want to do with charter schools. I don't necessarily feel the same way they do on that, right? I'm just putting it out there. So there's
No, but it's an issue.
None of our candidates are making a very clear statement about the way they stand on that, right? We have schools that may have 40% empty seats, and yet people don't want to share the space. I don't understand that. So there's a lot of things that we're going to have to actually see, particularly the Democrats, actually putting themselves out there, making a real statement about real issues that they haven't done yet. They haven't even put their toe in yet. And so I think once the teachers union anchors and backs someone, we're going to actually start seeing real debate around education. That's what I'm waiting for.
They tend to stay neutral in mayor's race. I mean,
Well, they have a lot in this horse.
No,
Let me
they'll
make
have
it
a lot
clear.
at
They have a
stake.
lot
They'll
at
have a
stake.
lot
They
at
have a
stake
lot
here.
at stake here.
And
Huge,
it's
huge.
probably, I mean,
Huge, yes.
early money would say that they would go to de Blasio.
Yeah.
Except that unions, the perception was that de Blasio was going to pick up a lot of union support and because, again, we're coming back to polls, because he has not showed up well in polls, that there's been a reluctance.
Zero. Absolutely zero. I mean,
Yeah.
John Liu, who's facing
He should probably
various-
run for re-election.
John Liu is facing various
have time?
ethical issues. Actually, has more union support than Bill de Blasio does.
And he has a base of people of color who want to support him as well too. We cannot ignore that.
Yeah, no,
I
that's
mean,
right.
we
That's the
really
point of
can't.
the
Lou, we can't count him out.
Oh no,
you know.
yeah, that's right.
I know this. I know we're in New York, but there is another party primary going on.
There is.
And we have elected, and it's actually a fairly spirited, and this is, and
absolutely.
setting aside the fact that, that the Bronx County chairman and the Queens deputy chairman are now facing federal trial in one of my, as a
Yeah.
kind of,
Aside from the indictments,
right.
things are going
Aside
great.
from, other than that, Mrs.
New York politics.
Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
How was the play? You do have a rather interesting race between Loda, who is kind of a more traditional Republican
Yeah.
candidate, who was quite moderate from any
Yes.
national Republican stance. We're talking about,
Absolutely.
it's kind of a Rockefeller Republican.
He's a
Yes, he is.
Giuliani Republican.
Yes,
He's
I
a
mean,
Giuliani.
yeah.
Well, I don't think he's as harsh as
No, but in
Giuliani. I
terms
think
of
he's
his
much
position.
more of a
He's a manager leader also.
much more of a
Right, very
humane
much so.
And we have Katsimatidis, who was our, billionaire,
Whose ideas are
billionaire
as
du
fresh
jour.
as his produce, as we said in the inner circle this
That was a line we used in a show. And who presumably will be putting a lot of money into it. And you have poor George McDonald, who tried not to go along with campaign finance and then decided, well, that's not working very well, so maybe now I will.
Yeah, but Katsimatidis
and I
probably
believe
won't,
that, because Democrats have a tendency to line them to organize a firing squad in a circle and take each other out, that's certainly how Michael Bloomberg got elected. Arguably, it was, Rudy Giuliani was elected because of perceived weaknesses and divisions around David.
Well, not
David
just weaknesses
Dinkins.
and divisions, but
The city's
2,000 murders and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. I mean, the city seemed like it was out of control. I mean, that's what put Rudy Giuliani in there. And then, and even Bloomberg, despite all of his money, if it wasn't for 9/11 and the fact that he was running against Mark Green, he probably wouldn't have been elected either. But then, but the issue is though whether absent those kind of crisis issues, whether Republicans in an 8-to-1 Democratic city are able to make.
I
the
will
case.
say that when you argue that the Bloomberg and by extension Quinn are taking a lot of heat over term limits, if you remember in the aftermath of 9/11, which was a mayoral election year, Giuliani decided that he wanted to do away with term limits without even having
he
an
just wanted to
election.
stay for
He
three
just-
more
He
months.
just
Yes.
decided that we didn't need an election, that it was important for him to stay there.
3 more months.
Three more
Remember
months.
that?
Yeah,
But what about this city has this confounding history of electing Republican mayors. Is that, and I think a lot of us focus.
You don't have to
totally
make it
on
sound such a bad thing.
Well, it's confounding. I don't think it's
A
necessarily
New York
bad thing.
Republican is not really a
A
Yeah,
New York
I mean, it's
Republican
like-
is not. That's right.
Like a Minnesota Republican. It's a little more.
I mean, how do you view this?
Well, I guess yes. I mean, I agree that no New York Republicans. It's really the same as the national Republicans because of the last 5 elections for mayor that we have had. I mean, we have had a Republican that everybody has voted for. I mean, and I think yes, the candidates that they choose are very popular. And like you said, there's been events where people really identified and given them support.
Arguably, it was weaknesses among the Democrats that led people, and they
That's
were
true,
credible,
too.
and they were credible candidates. I mean, I personally
And
think Loda
And
is a
you've
very
had
And they
this
were
is
not-
Democratic primary.
They were not socially conservative. Let's put that. I mean, that's an
They're New
important
Yorkers.
piece here, right?
They're-
And
they're New
then
Yorkers.
and they all
continue,
ran on
yes.
platforms, right, of being economically conservative at times that they felt that the city was railing out of control. They were strong on crime. I mean, look at all the language they used. It wasn't.
The law and order conservatives, and relatively speaking, economic.
But socially,
And
they were
social
hands
liberals.
off, right?
But-
Social liberals.
But there's an argument. An argument can be made as to whether Bloomberg is an economic conservative, because I mean, the budget under Bloomberg has gone up more than 50% since he came into office in 2000.
Yeah, but how much of
2002.
that is federal and state money that has been funneled in here?
Absolutely.
What Bloomberg has done,
I mean,
there are gimmicks on both sides. I mean, the budget he just presented continues the idea of the taxi money, the sale of taxi medallions. That's a bad budgetary gimmick
Because it's not there.
Forget whether it's not there. Even if it were there, it's a one-shot revenue stream to fund ongoing expenses. On the other side, the budget that the mayor proposed talks about the city paying 2.5% or thereabouts on general obligation bonds, when indeed the city has been paying 1/5 of that. 0.5% is what the city's been paying on. So he's built in a cushion there. And what is the budget for that's historic. The budget for next year anticipates an interest rate of over 4% on general obligation bonds. Again, the city has been paying about 0.5% on those general obligation bonds. So there's money that's tucked away.
And the higher the interest rate,
the more money we have.
the more money the city has to pay to bondholders.
So
there's
contracts that have to increase over time. I mean, there's certain pieces.
There is money that he's squirreled away, and this budget, I mean, not to dwell on it too heavily, this budget continues the annual dance because the city's budgeting process is just abysmal. The annual dance of saying, well, we'll cut the libraries,
Close the museums.
And then the city council restores it for 1 year, and then the next budget repeats the cuts. They don't, because the restoration doesn't go into the base. It's a wasted effort.
It's the annual The Sky is Falling.
Right.
Yeah.
And in fact, the coverage of it really is awful because it's a $70 billion budget. And I predict now, as it comes closer to negotiations, all the news stories will talk about
the $100 million.
$500 million out of a $70 billion budget.
I think there's another piece that's important, that even though we've had quite a few Republicans, is that no one's ever taken a conservative stance on immigration. They have, and I think that's important when you think about New York. No, they really haven't. No, I mean, considered a safe harbor city, this is huge.
It's not really a safe harbor city. Why do we have an INS truck outside of Rikers to take every
because we
immigrants
have, because
who are discharged
Because we're under federal orders.
How many exactly? Yeah. That was part of a nice agreement with states that we've seen all over the country, right?
And
I mean, there's 500,000 deportations, but I think that
tried to get out of that, and he couldn't.
He couldn't.
It's federal.
No, Illinois tried as well. There are many places that did, and they can't. So, but I think the piece is that no one has taken that on in a very negative way, and that's important because New York is changing. New York is changing immensely.
Let me bring. Christine Quinn is the front runner. I think that Mayor Peter Vallone Sr. and Mayor Gifford Miller tells us something about the difficulty of running for mayor, running for any executive position from a top legislative position, because those are very
also
different.
Governor.
Very different demands. But one of the problems she has is she's perceived as Bloomberg 4. She's perceived that her closeness to the mayor, who I believe remains very popular, by and large, among, but yet it's being. There's always a fatigue factor in a third term. I mean, third terms are not good things for municipal executives, for anybody. That's right.
Mario Cuomo, Alfonso.
I don't know. We have a lot of Congress members who.
But that's not an executive.
That's different. That's true.
So I mean, is Bloomberg draped around her neck, or is Bloomberg an advantage for Quinn, or both?
It could be both. Yes, it could be both, because there's a lot of people who like what Bloomberg has done. And if she mirrors that, then that's an advantage for her. But then on the other side, there's those who are against him. So if she represents that, then of course. So I think it could play either way, and it's already happening.
That goes to those socially liberal issues, though. I mean, she had to be dragged kicking and screaming into paid sick leave. She had to be dragged kicking and screaming into the living wage bill, which was a joke, both of which Bloomberg opposed. But now Quinn is on the right side of the issue as far as liberals are concerned, but they're not. But she's not.
I apologize because I can't remember the issue, but there was an issue that came up today, the day that we're taping, where she said, I am against the issue, but I'm going to permit a vote in the council, which is something
that's unusual for her.
Which it's not unusual. It's unprecedented for her, and she. Where I live on the Upper West Side, kind of a progressive Democratic haven.
It's colored red on maps, right?
Not politically red.
Old
It's quite blue. The other
Yes. sir.
No,
red is you're
red
showing
as
your
in-
age.
Red as in the Soviet
as in-
Union.
Right.
The
yeah.
Berlin, the Berlin Wall fell in 1989. I don't know if you noticed that.
That was in all the papers, wasn't it?
But even people who disagreed with her on the sick leave bill were very upset that she wouldn't allow it to go to a vote.
Yeah. They were very.
And that's, so I mean, even if you, and so I have a sense that that she has learned that lesson, that you have to let it go.
This is an interesting, I think a lot of people were closetly happy that it didn't go to vote because so many of the small businesses were against this.
Yeah.
The small businesses that support and contribute to council members. I mean, so it was really,
Well, it
they
was
would have
also-
really been
it was also
alienating
pointed out.
a
I'm
huge
not
small
sure
business.
that's actually right. I mean,
Why?
I'm on the board of the Community Service Society, and we had a day-long forum on this, and we had a host of people representing small business groups who were speaking in favor of it. So I don't think it's universal.
But
to say
it
that
depends on what number of staff, right? After what,
Right.
20 or so staff, you have to have certain things I'm talking about the real mom and pop, the smaller
Let's
ones.
think about it from a
that's
different
not-
aspect.
But I'm not
let's
saying
think
that
about
that's
it
a
from a
wrong
different
thing,
aspect.
but that is a pressure that nobody would want to admit that they would have to
But
count
that's
out.
why it changed at the end. I mean, it did not pass with the five
Right.
and
The-
5
yeah.
employees.
The example I always offer is that we've had this terrific grading system at restaurants. It's a very good guide.
It's a signaler, yes.
Exactly. Do you have any idea whether those restaurants have a paid sick leave policy? The cook in the back could be sneezing into your soup. Nobody's going to go to a restaurant again.
Yes.
The wait staff may be sick. If they don't have a paid sick leave policy, it doesn't have to be paid. If they don't have a sick leave policy, I challenge you to go into a restaurant and ask the waiter or waitress if they get time off for being sick.
And then
They
why are they
probably
not
don't.
paying living wages to their servers? And then why are they not? So
Well,
we're
servers are covered differently under labor relations law because they get tips.
Yeah, I know, but still, but at the same time, too, that's an exploited force as well. I mean, if we're going to go into the restaurant industry, that's, saying that this is something they want to,
I'm not sure that's
We
Wait,
have,
wait.
we have, in this case, I think the benefit of union contracts for all of our school employees, but this issue around the country is not only in terms of restaurants, but in terms of school lunch.
No, it's a
people.
health issue.
School
Of
lunch
course
people
it is.
who take
Exactly.
Of course
It
is.
has
I mean,
nothing to do
right.
with it is a health
Right.
issue. If the mayor pushed a smoking ban, not because he wanted people not to smoke, because wait staff was exposed to secondhand smoke. That was his rationale, for banning smoking in restaurants. Yet he's not doing that as a public health issue for paid sick leave.
Yeah.
Is this issue political? Is this issue economic? Is this issue substantive? Is this issue everything?
Yes.
Which
Everything.
one?
The paid, let's just take the paid sick leave as an example of how politics played out in very complicated ways.
Well, I mean, it's political, and it's political. It's obviously political, partly because of the mayoral issue and Quinn and so forth. But I mean, there are substantial economic and business questions raised by it, and completely legitimate ones. I mean, a lot of these issues come down to the amount of regulations, say the city council often wants to impose on business, makes doing business in New York City problematic, particularly for small businesses. And I mean,
I think a bigger issue is actually tickets. That the
well, the whole
tickets
fee,
that small
the whole,
businesses
that I agree with. But I mean, that's one aspect of it. But the amount of kind of additional regulations and the various hoops that businesses have to go through, I mean, it makes it difficult to start and run businesses in New York.
It
What
would
the
have
speaker
been great.
proposed-
It would have been great to see the paid sick leave really take on a level of movement. Particularly when you're thinking about restaurants, you're thinking about who cooks and who serves in those restaurants, who's in the back of the house, because this is what it impacts right? That could be one of the largest Latino lobbies, let me tell you.
But then
and
it
it wasn't
made it more difficult
absolutely
and hard to approve.
Exactly. So, and there's a reason why they couldn't. It's the risk factor of them being out there, not being. You know, this is the working poor in
there's
this
also the
city who
immigration-
it's supposed to help, and yet they couldn't mobilize.
And that's where the immigration issues also
Yeah.
come in as well.
Oh,
How many of them, are they all legal, and whether they want to step forward or not is.
And you do have to think of the consequences of things. The speaker proposed the other day that the age to sell cigarettes be raised to 21.
To 21.
Okay, I mean, anti-smoking advocates will applaud that, but think about those small businesses you're talking about, those small mom and pop stores. They're not making a lot of money on selling of cigarettes, but somebody comes in, a 19-year-old, a 20-year-old comes in to buy a pack of cigarettes legally now, but illegally under the speaker's proposal, and won't be buying something else. You reduce traffic into the store,
That's right.
and that's where those small stores will lose because of the speaker's
And
proposal.
especially since, I mean, they're only going to do this in the five boroughs. You know, somebody could.
They'll be driving to Jersey.
Well, drive to Jersey, go over the path, or you know, if they're in Queens, they'll walk across the street and they're suddenly in Nassau County and they're buying cigarettes. I mean, it's.
But you can make
just
this
the same
argument,
way
but the
you can buy a
smoking
big gulp
policy
somewhere
and,
else.
I always state my conflicts. I work with the Coalition for a Smoke-Free City, but the public health agenda that Bloomberg, there's an economic aspect to it, but I think pretty clearly the motivation is a public health agenda, and arguably the dramatic declines in smoking rates that we've seen since 2002, since the Smoke-Free Air Act, since the banning of smoking in restaurants and offices, combined with the state putting all this money in, has driven smoking down. Not only
I don't think
among
any of us
adults,
are arguing in
also
favor of
among-
smoking.
Look, I've never smoked. I've never smoked in my life.
I'm not sure
my
that this is an economic issue for the mayor.
Well, yeah,
It's a
I've never
public
smoked in
health
my
issue.
life. My mother's always smoked, and I've always tried to get her to quit and so forth. That said, you start getting into the area of kind of personal choices and personal freedoms. Once you've pushed it out of the workplace, once you've pushed it out of restaurants and so forth, you get to a point that this is ultimately a legal product. And why are you trying to, in a sense, almost kind of, now potentially criminalize a small class, a small group? I mean, I just think I think this is where the whole Nanny Bloomberg aspect comes in, and that's also a legacy of his that I think people
Quinn's being
about.
accused of now with her new proposal.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, when you say, is it for public health or for economic reasons? I mean, you could frame all these policy issues in multiple ways, and they should. There should be I remember this. Maybe the audience would not remember this when we were talking about the ban in restaurants. I mean, did you hear that? We're going to go broke. The restaurants are going to close.
and
We had the
that
biggest
hasn't
names
happened.
in restaurants.
Right. And in fact, when was the last time you heard somebody complain about the lack of a smoke-filled restaurant?
So,
because they, pardon, I don't mean to get on.
Yeah, no, but I mean, but it's an
soapbox,
example of.
But a lot of the nanny state things become social norms very quickly, and they're self-enforcing. That they're not so much in the restaurants because there's ticketing, but like in the parks and the
With
beaches.
a ban on large sodas?
Yeah, but the rebellion.
large sodas is different.
No, but the ban. Yeah, but the reaction against the large soda thing was, I mean, was kind of across the board. I mean, the smoking thing, broke down among those who either.
The
There's
Times
more known
editorialized
smokers
against
and
it.
smokers, so yes, it's going to have a lot of popularity. But the soda thing was way too much.
Well, but it's still alive. Remember, it's still
It is.
Well,
still in the courts.
it was also being done through the Board of Health and not through the City Council.
City Council, which
it was being done virtually administratively, although the Board of Health is at least in terms of the charter, is an independent agency.
That said,
But
the
in the
City
real
Council
world,
could
it's
have
not.
passed legislation to override it.
Well, and at the same time, on the sick leave issue, it was pointed out to me because I was hearing about all this hell that Quinn was taking on not letting it go to a vote. It was pointed out to me that any 7 members can petition to take a bill out of committee and
that's
put it
right.
on the floor.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
they
That's what
did
I
not
said.
do that.
They
So
weren't
that's why
happy
you
about
But because of her other powers.
But
They
no,
wanna
no, no.
cross the
But
speaker.
that's why I
Exactly.
said that. Well, no,
Look what
no.
happened
You
to
can go
Elizabeth
across
Crowley
the.
when
You're
she
happy
crossed
to
the
go.
speaker.
No, you can cross the speaker in a minute if you're not going to be backing her up. They're knowing who they're trying to back
Yeah.
up. They just were covering themselves too. Let me
I
make
think
it
they're
clear.
right.
This was not about. They
There
let
was
her be the
posturing
fall
as
guy,
opposed to-
and that
there was-
exactly.
Let me stop. Take a question. Tell us your name and your campus, and speak up, please.
Hey, my name is Mana Sabori. I'm from Queens College, and I would like to ask, what impact will Citizens United have on the race for mayor in 2013?
Well, that's very interesting because you were here with the guy, with the lawyer.
We are,
Right.
we're already seeing it. I mean,
Yeah.
you did see ads, anybody but Quinn ads, independent expenditures. So we're seeing that, the impact of the equivalent of Citizens United already. And I suspect, we don't know, they're calling themselves anybody but Quinn. We don't know who they are supporting. And I suspect we're going to see independent expenditures mounted in other aspects.
First of all, I
of the
mean,
campaign.
And I see no problem with that. I mean, let as many flowers bloom in terms of people getting their voices out, getting their opinions out.
as long as it's not coordinated with the campaign.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but I mean, and even if the coordination question, I think, is something that will probably be litigated down the road as well. I mean, but
also but also our system so far is not covered by Citizens United on a local level. I think that the logic of Citizens United, because the court overturned a limited system in Montana, I believe, it seems to me exposes us to a very similar challenge with the sitting Supreme Court that we have. But right now, our system doesn't fall under Citizens United because it is a local match system.
What also exposes us is a Supreme Court decision that outlawed an Arizona provision, which provided a greater match of public funding for candidates who don't
who are self-funding
who are-
against
who-
candidates
exactly.
who are self-funding. And hasn't,
Exactly.
in fact, Michael Bloomberg kind of shredded the very idea of the campaign finance.
You made reference to a conflict before, your own personal conflict, and I should note for the record that I am working with a special prosecutor looking into some campaign finance issues.
We won't go into that, but
We
we'll
won't
talk
go into
about
the
it later.
details.
Yes,
indictments to become later.
yes.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Gaida. I'm from Kingsborough College. And I'd like to know, besides Speaker Quinn, who has the best chance among women in 2013, among the Democrats and also among the Republicans?
Who has the best chance of getting votes from
attracting women's
The women's vote?
Women's vote?
Yes.
Oh,
That's a good question.
it's a really good question.
Assuming
very
women
sexist,
vote
we
as
won't
some
let the
block.
women in.
No,
assuming
I mean,
that
it's
there's
an
a block
interesting,
vote.
I mean, the next in the city council that people were saying it's popular and it's a good fit for the Speaker of the House. It's Melissa Mark Viverito. It's one of the names that kind of come across a lot more, but I don't know how that will play in influencing the women votes
and she's certainly,
in the
she's
election.
certainly
It'll be kind
doing her
of interesting
fundraising.
because-
But the question about the women as voter base, is that the way you meant it? Women as voters?
Yeah, who would-
So
who would
I think that they would, beyond Quinn, it would be between, I think Thompson could get quite a bit of the female vote. Too.
But isn't it
I
because?
do. I do.
But
That's
I mean,
just, but
I still
that's
think that
speculation.
I don't think we're post-identity politics.
No.
But I think that identity politics can't be too heavily relied on in analyzing what people. People vote. In a country where we have an African American mayor, an African American president, where we've had an African American mayor here, where you have, an Asian American comptroller, that at some point.
But
the
Yeah, but
first.
what's
but here's-
interesting?
but
Think about, I think it's also who are the partners too, right? So let's look at de Blasio's wife,
I was
right?
about
And
to
I
say
think
that,
this is
yes.
important. Look, sends his kids to public school. She's very visible and active. So, for people who live in Brooklyn, I mean, they see that family unit and you see they're a team.
And
Yes,
Even
and
maybe
it
more
shows
than,
that
I
she's
mean,
part of-
yeah,
former
she's part of it.
And she's.
Doesn't matter though.
That's
But
I mean, it's the voter base.
To Bob's point, though, about identity issues. I mean, New York, which sees itself as so liberal, so progressive, and so forth, has never voted for a woman for mayor. Has never voted for an openly gay mayor either. So
we don't know We don't.
The-
we
these-
haven't
the-
had one.
Well, you see,
run
I was
before.
going to
you
say,
don't break
this
the
is
you
a
don't
unique
break
time.
the glass ceiling. The glass ceiling doesn't get broken until it actually gets broken, and
sometimes it just gets cracked, not
and so-
broken. And then
it may
Hillary
very-
Clinton, 18 million.
You don't know. You don't know what women.
There you
You
go.
don't know what voters are going to do once they're inside the voting booth. Some women may want to vote for Chris Quinn because she's a woman. In some of the more culturally conservative areas in Queens and Brooklyn and so forth, you might have some women who maybe they don't want to vote for a lesbian. They may say the right things when they answer polls, but you don't know what's going to be happening.
It goes beyond that because, like you
Particularly
said, like
minority
Bill de Blasio presenting his wife, and women feel identified with that. Oh, you know, he has a wife, they have kids. You know, they're struggling the way we are struggling. I mean, they're taking kids to school. They go into overcrowded, you know, schools. It's a matter of identity sometimes.
And Billy Thompson, you know, probably had some, you know, problems in his first marriage, and he's actually kind of confronted that, saying, you know, I was not as good a husband to her as I should have been, and so it's hard to say how a lot of these things can play out.
Yes, by the way, in terms of women, it's very interesting to look at the Manhattan Borough President's race where you have three women
Yes.
and one man running. So yes.
So my name's Kieran Mahoney from John Jay College, and my question is, what factors will decide the primary contest for Queensborough President and Manhattan Borough President? And do those races tell us anything about the direction of the mayor's race?
Well, the Queensborough president is a wonderful mess.
Has anybody been indicted in that one yet?
No.
Not yet.
I mean,
As of this hour,
Right.
right now.
I mean, you've got kind of three candidates there. You've got, I mean, if you want to look at it in terms of identity, you've got an African-American candidate, Leroy Comer. You've got a Latino candidate, in Peralta, no relation.
Not
you've got
related to me.
and you've got
Vallone.
Peter, and you've got Peter Vallone Jr. or the third or the fourth. And so, but it seems to me that the county organization, which is very powerful out there, is kind of more interested in Peralta for their own internal political reasons. So, but that's one that, you know, as a Brooklyn chauvinist, it wounds me to say that Queens is much more diverse than Brooklyn is, because I am a Brooklyn chauvinist. And I don't like that, but I try not to let the facts get in the way of a good story.
Well, it's a good representation of
Right.
Queens.
I mean, but,
Yes.
but I mean,
You
Queens
see
is,
the
Queens
candidates.
is unbelievable. So, you know, if you want to figure Queens on identity politics, you're going to have 75 candidates.
And Brooklyn will elect the first black borough
Well, the
president.
first African American, that's right, Senator Adams. And in Manhattan, it's a very interesting race. I'm going to have to vote in my political club on that. I have no clue who I'm voting for. But that's, you have kind of a juggernaut in Julie Menon, who was the former
County Board,
Community
Board
Board
one, yeah.
down in Lower Manhattan. You've got three very credible city council members, and Robert Jackson and Julie and Jessica Lappin and Gail Brewer now. So that's a, you know, I don't know what that tells you about the mayor's race, except that, and this is speaking as a former reporter, and I'd like to hear you all on this. Running for mayor is very different because it's such a high visibility. For all the money you spend, there's a lot of free media coverage. I mean, that people don't just get their information, which is not the case in a council race. It's not the case. You go into any city in the country, and there's one congressman. You come into New York City, you got 10. So even congressional races don't get covered.
Could this question, though, and I hate to put words in the questioner's mouth, but could it do something about that? Could it suggest that there's a bottom-up effect? 3 women running for borough president in Manhattan. Will that draw more women out to vote in Manhattan than otherwise might have happened? The diversity of the race in Queens, might that draw people from different ethnic groups out, and where will they go
That's a good question.
in the mayor at the top of the ticket? Usually
Well, in my council district, there are 12 candidates running, and
Right now.
of whom, well, we don't know who's going to. Of course, we
Right.
don't know when the primary is, but that says something about Albany. So, I mean, the degree to which if you have a hotly contested council race, those people are organizing people who will bring people out. So, I mean, you know, politics is a zero-sum game. Somebody wins, somebody loses. In the mayor's race and in the citywides, because of a runoff, it's not necessarily a zero-sum game because you can get 2 bites at the apple. But on everything below it, you don't get two bites at the apple. So it's a very complicated system.
And I'd also add, for the young man who asked the question from John Jay, right? Is that where, right? No. You know, those really aren't powerful positions, the borough presidents. You know, I think that's really critical there. And so there, at one time, those were plum positions. You would want those. You really were a power broker. You had an enormous amount of financial flexibility. You don't have that now.
Not in 25
so you don't
One
see that as a
significant
stepping.
appointment.
Yeah, exactly. So
To land city planning.
yeah, but you're right, to city planning, but you don't, but it's not really a stepping stone in the way that others would have thought of it. I mean, Thompson had worked in the borough president's
He was
office,
deputy
right?
borough president of Brooklyn.
For many years.
In fact,
right?
that's, you know, if you...
Well, Scott
other than-
Stringer is going to be the comptroller. I'm willing to go out
But
on a
that's
limb
still like
and
a-
say
It's
that.
Still,
There's no
yeah, it's a
opposition.
little, yeah, but it's.
But it's still a way as a trampoline to go, you know,
For visibility,
citywide.
maybe,
Yes,
for
I think
visibility.
I think
Look
it's
at
more than
what
that.
Marty
Yes, you're
Markowitz
right.
has done to the borough
It's
presidency
the
in Brooklyn.
skills that you bring to
Well,
that
yeah.
office. The office on paper is frankly a nonsense office, but it's the political skills that you have that
Yeah.
you can bring. I mean, I think Stringer's been very effective. I think Diaz
sense?
up in
Yeah.
the Bronx.
Well,
Stringer has been. He has reformed the way community boards. He's issued some very serious analyses of real estate stuff.
I mean,
very
I think
serious analyses.
Diaz is.
You play the cards you're dealt, and if you have the political skills, they could be played very well to the benefit of the city. I am not, you know, I voted against the 1989 city charter because it, I think, destroyed the role of boroughs. And I think in the city of 8 million
did.
people, how can you identify with 8 million people? You got to identify with a smaller and it kept the city council president, you know, recasting it as what's now called the public advocate. So, and that was done because to provide a minority a chance to get elected citywide, and that year David Dinkins got elected mayor. So that kind of undercut even the reason that they were talking about.
And a green guy got elected public advocate.
Well, that's
So I actually think that the borough president's offices can be quite effective.
Yeah, but I think they'd probably be happy that there is a mayoral election also happening because I don't think the turnout would be that strong
If it was-
otherwise,
if
right?
it
I
was-
think the
yeah.
draw
Oh, if it was just borough
right.
president,
So
sure.
I think it's actually the opposite effect would be they're excited that they're going to get all the traffic because of the mayoral election. versus-
Except, as Bob suggested, they're, you know, with, you know, very dedicated candidates who will try to do whatever they can to gin up the turnout. Yeah, and I wouldn't discount the idea of 3 women running for borough president of Manhattan as increasing
We're
female
also
vote.
trying to explain to our community what what is the function of a borough president for
Well,
them
when
to
you
go
figure
and
it out,
show.
let us know.
Yes,
Well,
I'll
in-
let
in
you
the-
know.
In the
Diaz has
Bronx,
been very
in
effective.
the Bronx, it's to
Diaz has. I would agree with
in the
you.
Bronx, it's to crush developments. So you because they're not coming under a living wage.
Oh, wow. Oh, there we go.
That's actually a Kingsbridge Armory comment, and this week they're getting ice skating rinks. Yes.
Oh, yeah, finally.
Good evening. My name is Natalia Collantes from Queens College, and my question this evening is, why has the race to replace Councilman Jackson in Upper Manhattan has become so heated?
Boy, I mean, I think that's a whole other debate.
That's scary. Actually, that's my district. Actually, and
my district also. It has to do with it's a plurality Latino district, but it's not a majority anything district, and you have
it's a little bit of black-brown.
you had
tensions.
it's so endless. You had the current state senator Espaillat, who cut a deal with Mark Levine to try to deliver the Dominican vote. You have a man named Zayed Ramadan, who's a very interesting man, who is not trying to become the first Muslim city councilman because Robert Jackson is the first Muslim city councilman, the incumbent, who's running for borough president, who has significant support in Harlem. You have one kind of racist circus entrepreneur who's running around
one?
throwing. I don't want to mention his name.
Oh, and there's also a little bit of a spillover of the congressional primary
The Wrangell Espai.
the Wrangell
Yes,
Espai thing because some of their various supporters are now clashing on the
Yeah, but that's a whole. I mean, it's a wonderful question, but we need hours, and of course the other problem in terms of your last comment, which is telling. As a former political reporter, is just as generals tend to fight the last war, we tend to refight the last campaign, and there are always new issues going on. There's also new dynamics in play. Yes.
Hi, my name's Valerie Littleton Cohen, and I'm a student at York College. How do the Republican candidates handle the Bloomberg issue, and do they present themselves as the sequel to Bloomberg, or must they distance themselves from the past 12 years?
I think they're both trying to say, I'm Bloomberg.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Katsimatides, I think, wants to be the businessman / manager mayor.
He does. I mean, I think Loda actually, I think.
Thank you for that question, by the way. We're talking about Republicans.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, exactly. Loda is actually kind of trying to carve a very kind of careful path here, because on the one hand, while he doesn't mind being associated with Rudy Giuliani, he does not want to be seen as Rudy Giuliani.
Giuliani's the best and
he
worst
doesn't-
thing he has going.
And he doesn't necessarily, while he supports a number of Bloomberg things, like in terms of the cops and things like that, he's also made some been very clear. He's criticized Bloomberg actually on the managing of the budget. He also called
Bloomberg an idiot.
He called him an idiot.
That
he
was
also,
during some MPA stuff.
and he also criticized him for running for the third term as well. So I mean, I think he's actually running a rather kind of smart, kind of a smart.
He's a very talented guy.
Yeah.
He is. He is. I think we shouldn't underestimate that. I mean, I
Well,
don't think it's-
and you shouldn't underestimate the one thing that Giuliani and Bloomberg, I think, have proved is that the Republican nomination is worth happening.
Yeah.
Is worth having because of Democrats' propensity to behave like Democrats.
And in the aftermath of a very divisive Democratic primary, and this certainly will be, regardless if it wins, if Loda were to prevail in the Republican primary, he could sneak through.
Yes, sir.
Hi. Hi, I'm Abel Tabares from Bronx Community College. I want to know how the relief efforts and the effects of Sandy, how the candidates for mayor are addressing that, and what percentage of the population, New York population, was happy with Bloomberg's, how Bloomberg dealt with the disaster, and how that's going to affect Quinn since she has such close ties.
I actually think probably the biggest beneficiary is Loda, because if you compare what happened in Jersey, where they did not take the trains out, he took the trains out a day and a half early, and therefore we did not get destroyed. The amount of rolling stock on New Jersey Transit that was destroyed in the storm is going to take them years to rebuild.
Yeah, I mean,
We've also had competing plans of what do we do next. I mean, Quinn has offered the most comprehensive and the most expensive plan.
Well, the governor was driving that. Governor Cuomo was driving a lot of it in terms of buying up waterfront property.
No, but she was talking about the seawall in Lower Manhattan.
But this is where the Queens
whether it's
go.
realistic is not a point for the moment. But she was the first one out of the box saying, "Here's what we have to do to defend against this going forward."
See, I think this is where the Queensboro president could be a meaningful race. If they really were going to take on these issues, talk about real estate, you say where could use a platform? That's where I'd want to see where the Sandy policy is coming from. There's no question that borough was disproportionately destroyed.
And
Staten Island.
Staten Island as well.
And a number of people have said that running the MTA is a liability for Loda. The Sandy response, though, is one area where it does actually come in as a strength for him, because I mean he got the trains running up.
It got him
But he
enough
also
publicity to allow him to run.
I mean, vote for me. I raised the fare.
But the fact is, he didn't raise the fare. The fares had to went up because of the deal that was cut by the legislature. That is not something that the
Yeah, but I don't think you could argue
that
he wouldn't
nuance
have
is
seen
not
it,
going
but
to come
as
out during the campaign.
the manager that he is, he would have supported raising the fare.
Yeah, he would.
I
agree.
would
Well,
argue differently.
and that's probably true, because you can't get something for nothing. I mean,
And you can't run away from things that happen on your watch.
There's a reason. There's a reason why this is the best urban transportation system, and everybody has to kind of put their money in.
I was going to say that then he could use that as an excuse for everything. That this deal's cut and that he
there you
can't
go.
really
Yeah,
have
I
a
was
say
locked
in it.
into it. Yeah.
Well, actually, one of the things that he pointed out is that in the year-to-year budget the last year-to-year budget that he crafted, the day-to-day expenses went down. Any increase in the budget was because of things like pensions and health benefits, which he's actually trying to get adjusted. But that's again an Albany.
He also, I want to get our last question. That he also had very good relationship with the Transport Workers Union, a good working relationship.
Yeah, that's true.
And we haven't seen that in a long time.
Which we have not seen in a long time at the MTA.
correct.
Yes.
Right.
Good evening. My name is Sabrina Estefan from Queens College, and my question is for Professor Nieves. if Christine Quinn were to be elected as mayor of New York City, do you believe she would take the same approach as Bloomberg when managing the city?
Wow.
That's a small question.
It's a small, I'm sure you have 3 minutes. I think we all have different views. I would say it's going to be really interesting who the teachers back up. I do want to say that first, because that major platform, when we want to say Bloomberg 4, you have to include his education platform, how he thinks about that. And she's not put anything out. So I don't know if she would look like a Bloomberg. I'll be honest with you there. I think the other thing is that she will be socially liberal, as he has been, and I don't think that's going to change. But I think the biggest issues we've yet to see. I have to say.
I would offer a different interpretation in that one of the things that's hidden, that's beneath the surface, is how a mayor manages internal communications, agency A to agency B to agency C. And I don't believe, based on what I've observed in Christine Quinn, that she does very well in managing the way different committees operate with each other and how everything has to run through her.
It's the
as
same
the
way
speaker.
with Bloomberg. It's the same way with
No,
Bloomberg.
but actually that's not true.
That's not true.
Loda actually pointed this out.
When, other than the health commissioner and the police commissioner, when do you hear from
But you
city
have a
commissioners?
system of deputy mayors where one deputy mayor is in charge of 4 agencies, another 4 other agencies, and so on. So he has fostered that in those internal
And he sees so much responsibility.
Those are the big agents.
And,
That's right.
and transportation.
No, but I know, and I'm not criticizing. I'm not criticizing this.
He allowed
Janet
Janet Sadik-Khan to turn the cities into bike lanes, and I mean he gives a lot of.
Wow. It is Robert Moses.
I mean, no, but it's true. I mean,
the bike is not even out yet, and you're saying
you don't live in Brooklyn. You don't know the bike lanes yet. Wait till
I'm sorry. No, I used to live in Brooklyn, and I've got a lot of.
We'll welcome you back.
And that was part of his initiative with the big environmental plans that he had.
Plan NYC.
But there are so many.
So it's still his.
But it is rare to see any incoming mayor have as much experience as Bloomberg has had managing very large, big things like that. Loda would be the only one who's probably managed.
We have only
complex
30
things.
seconds. I'm going to totally put you on the spot. Who's going to be the Democratic nominee?
Ay, Dios mío.
Who's going to be the Democratic nominee?
Chris Quinn.
Who's going to be the Democratic nominee?
I think it's between Quinn and Thompson.
I think it's between Quinn and Thompson.
Who's going to be the
I'm with
Thompson,
you on that.
unless Weiner comes into the race.
If Weiner, actually, I'm going to amend that. I will amend that. If Weiner stays out, I think Thompson will be the next mayor. If Weiner gets in, I think it'll be Quinn.
Okay.
I think we're just about out of time. I want to thank everybody, and we will see you all next time on CUNY Forum.